Thank you for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts football podcast, where we discuss the latest news, rumors, and games of the NFL and college football. From the latest science ditchers, breakout stars, and all the news in between. As always, I'm Jeremiah, and we are back for our first show of 2017. Yes, 2017. It is a brand new year. It is a new year here at the GSMC Podcast Network, and we have a lot to talk about on this first show of 2017. We just witnessed the College Football Playoff this past Saturday, and we also just witnessed Week 17 in the NFL. We had the playoff matches sets and the wild card weekend. I will get to that a little bit later. And we got a couple of head coaches in the NFL who won't be on the sidelines with their respective teams that they coached this year in 2017. And we're going to also talk about maybe some speculation where some coaches will go, what approaches these teams might take in hiring their GMs or coaches. But that will be at the end of the show. But let's get started first with NFL Week 17. And there's a lot of games that didn't matter, but you know me, I am going to pretty much recap the entire week. In one of the first games of the morning, the Baltimore Ravens were defeated by the Cincinnati Bengals 27-10. Both of these teams weren't really playing for anything. The Ravens were basically playing for a winning season. This was Steve Smith's final game of his career, and in his final game, Steve Smith he actually caught 3 passes for 34 yards and a touchdown. So he didn't really have the big game that I thought he would have, but he does go out on his terms, and I gotta say, what an unbelievable career he has had. And Rex Burkhead, the Cincinnati running back, had a real good game, 119 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. And the Houston Texans, the 4th seed in the playoffs in the AFC South champion, were defeated by the Tennessee Titans 24-17. Tom Savage actually got hurt in this game. He had to leave the game, and that, you know what that means. Brock Osweiler was back as the Houston quarterback, and Osweiler went 253 passing and 1 touchdown. Derrick Henry led the way for the Titans with 65 yards and a touchdown, and DeAndre Hopkins came alive with 123 yards receiving. So maybe with DeAndre Hopkins' pretty good game, could possibly be a positive for the Texans going into the playoffs this weekend. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers won against the Carolina Panthers 17-16. You know, both of these teams were really going opposite directions. The Panthers finished a disappointing season at 6-10. The Bucs finished at 9-7. They did win, but they were eliminated from the playoffs. Yes, they were eliminated from the playoffs, and I think the Bucs will be one of those teams to look out for next year. I just think they just weren't ready yet for that big primetime spot. But I do like what I'm seeing from the Tampa Bay heading into next year. And Carolina, they just went a complete opposite direction I thought they would be going to. But I do expect them to bounce back. I do expect them to get that secondary a whole lot better. I really think they're going to try to work on that. I think they're going to try to get a running back there. I would love that they spend that number one that first-round draft pick on the running back. I could possibly say maybe if Leonard Fournette happens to drop all the way there, I can see him taking there. Dalvin Cook, who just declared for the NFL draft, I think he would be a good fit there for the Carolina Panthers, but that remains to be seen in this spring. And the Indianapolis Colts finished a 8-8 season with a 24-20 victory over the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have the 4th pick in the NFL draft. Andrew Luck finishes the year with 321 yards passing, 2 touchdowns against the Jaguars. Corey Grant of the Jaguars probably had one of the best games of any Jacksonville running back this year, 122 yards and a touchdown. And T.Y. Hilton finishes the day with 6 receptions, 95 yards. And Frank Gore finishes the season with over 1,000 yards rushing And I think he was the first running back at 33 to do that in a long time. So, yeah, that doesn't happen a lot. And Frank Gore continues to defeat Father Time there. And the Patriots cap off a 14-2 season with a 35-14 victory over the Miami Dolphins, the 6th seed in the playoffs. Tom Brady finishes a phenomenal, I think he's a phenomenal MVP caliber season with a 276-yard and 3-touchdown performance. Jay Ajayi finishes a breakout year with a kind of a disappointing game with 59 yards on 16 carries. Julian Edelman, probably player of the game, 151 yards and 1 touchdown. Tom Brady finishes the year with a 28-2 touchdown and interception ratio, and that is probably the best I've seen in a long time. And I know that the Patriots, they win games without Brady when he was suspended for 4 games. They went 3-1 without him, but the fact that Tom Brady did all this without his top target, Rob Gronkowski, really says something to me. And I do think he should be consideration for MVP. I really do think so. Like a 28-2 touchdown ratio, that is insane. That's insane. Tom Brady just continues to show us why he is the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And the Vikings, moving on, the Vikings finished a kind of a disappointing season. They started out 5-0, and then they kind of fell off down the stretch here, but they finished the season at 8-8 with a victory over the Chicago Bears, 38-10. The Bears finished the year at 3-13, and also clinched the number 3 pick in the NFL draft. Sam Bradford finishes the year with a 250-yard and 3 touchdown performance. Jordan Howard breaks a rookie rushing record for the Bears with a 23-yard carry and 135-yard performance. And Kyle Rudolph remains the top target there in Minnesota with 117 yards receiving and a touchdown. And it's interesting to see what happens with the Vikings next year. Will Teddy Bridgewater, will he get healthy in time? Will Sam Bradford still be the quarterback there? It remains to be seen. And what's going to happen with Adrian Peterson? What's going to happen with this? What's going to happen with this team? Because they couldn't run the ball. The offensive line was hurt. There's question marks there at the quarterback position. So it remains to be seen. One of the interesting teams to look at this year in the offseason. It remains to be seen how this team looks moving forward to 2017. Moving on, the New York Jets defeated the Buffalo Bills 30-10. The Jets finished a disappointing season with a victory that proved them to 5-11, and the Bills finished the year at 7-9 after we thought, or at least I did, thought they were going to be a potential playoff team there. Fitzpatrick finishes the day with a 210 passing and 2 touchdown performance. Below Powell, who I think could be the New York Jets running back next year, could finish the year with a 122 yards rushing game on 22 carries. Quincy Enunwa was the leading receiver for the Jets at 81 yards and 5 receptions. And moving on to the NFC East here, the Cowboys were defeated. They lost their 3rd game of the year to the Philadelphia Eagles, 27-13. The Eagles finished a pretty good year, 7-9. I didn't have a lot of expectations for the Eagles this year, and I didn't think they'll be at that spot. I thought they would be I thought they would have finished with one of the bottom 5 worst records. I just didn't see a whole lot of talent. But Carson Wentz looks like he is a franchise quarterback. I think he's going to get better moving forward. He did hit the rookie wall at times, but I do expect good things for this Eagles team next year. If the Eagles happen to draft some receivers, I think this team could be a really good team in the NFC East, because this is a very strong division. I don't think it's going to get any worse. Every team looked like they got better this year, and I think every team in this division is going to get better again. But yeah, the big story in this game, though, for the Cowboys versus Eagles Tony Romo got his first game action since, I don't know, in a year and a half, ever since he got hurt. So, he led the way with the touchdown drive there. And, he was only in the game for one series. But after he was pulled, Mark Sanchez looked like he was Mark Sanchez, and that's all I'm going to say. But a big game and a huge performance in this game happened with Zach Ertz, the tight end of Philadelphia. He finishes the game with 13 receptions, 139 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So he looks like he could possibly be the top target for Carson Wentz heading into 2017. Okay, and the Pittsburgh Steelers squeaked by the Cleveland Browns. Yes, the Cleveland Browns looked like they were on their second straight win of the year, but fall late to the Steelers 27-24. This was a game where Ben Roethlisberger, Le'Veon Bell, and Antonio Brown did not play at all. So, there's reason why the Bills are in this game. But Isaiah Crowell of the Browns finished with a really good game, 19 carries, 152 yards. Terrell Pryor finishes a breakout year with a 94-yard and 7-reception performance. Landry Jones, who started this game in place of Ben Roethlisberger, played really well, actually. 277 yards and 3 touchdowns. So the Steelers will be the number 3 seed in the AFC playoffs in the wild card weekend. And the Falcons, who were playing for a first-round bye, actually clinched their first-round bye with a 38-32-yard win over the New Orleans Saints. Drew Brees had a really good game for the Saints with 350 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Michael Thomas had an incredible performance with 156 yards and 1 touchdown. And Mark Ingram also led the way with 103 yards and 1 touchdown for the New Orleans Saints, but that just wasn't enough against a really good Falcons team. Matt Ryan was just better with 331 yards passing and 4 touchdowns. Devontae Freeman, 96 yards rushing and 1 touchdown. Julio Jones, 96 yards receiving and 1 touchdown. So, yeah, this was a very good performance from the Atlanta Falcons, and I think they can go on a deep playoff run. They may not have a really good defense like the Giants. They may not have the running game like the Cowboys. But this is probably one of the best it's one of the most balanced offense, really explosive offense that I think that can compete with anybody in the NFC. I don't think they can go into Dallas and beat the Cowboys, but I do think they can go all the way to the championship game. Yes, I do, but I will talk about that in a little bit of the playoff matchups. And the Redskins had a chance to clinch a playoff berth yesterday, but they fell short to the New York Giants, 19-10. Yeah, the Redskins season ends at 7-1, and the Giants go into the playoffs with an 11-5 record. And Kirk Cousins finishes the day with 287 yards receiving and 1 touchdown. Paul Perkins of the Giants, who I think is going to be their running back into next year, and I think he's going to make a huge impact in the playoffs this year, finishes the day with 102 yards and 21 carries. And Pierre Garçon was the leading receiver with 96 yards and 4 receptions. So, yeah, it remains to be seen if Kirk Cousins is going to come back to the Redskins, because remember, his contract is up. He was franchise tagged. So that is something to look at this offseason with Washington. And the Arizona Cardinals absolutely stomped the Los Angeles Rams 44-6. This game had a big story in this game. Is David Johnson, the Arizona Cardinals running back, had a tore ACL. And, man, this was an ugly injury. It happened in the first half. Oh, man. It is terrible that what happened to David Johnson. He was having such a real good year. I thought he was going to cap it off with a real good performance, and it looked like he was on his way. But, man, very unfortunate for the Cardinals to have their ultimate top offensive weapon go down like that. It remains to be seen what the recovery time is for David Johnson heading to 2017. And all I got to say is the Cardinals really do need David Johnson strong next year, because I absolutely think David Johnson is one of the top dynamic playmakers in all of football. But the Cardinals finished 7-8-1, and the Rams finished a disappointing season at 4-12. And moving on to the later games here. The Broncos defeated the Oakland Raiders 24-6. This was the first game without Derek Carr for the Raiders since I think 2010. And Matt McGloin was playing pretty solid, but he did get hurt with a shoulder injury in the second half, which means Connor Cook came into the game and led the Raiders to the lone touchdown drive of the game, but it just wasn't enough. This Broncos offense was actually running the ball really well, which is something I didn't think they were going to do, but they did it really good. They played really good defense, which I knew that was going to happen. The Raiders they just couldn't stop anybody on defense, and heading to the playoffs, this team really worries me. But I gotta say, this was a really great year for the Raiders. They finished 12-4, clinched a playoff berth in 13 years. So for that, I do think it's a great season for the Raiders. But the fact that there were so high expectations as the season moved on, and there was so much talk of a Super Bowl contender, it was just shattered by the huge injury to Derek Carr. And I do think this is a team that I don't think they're going to go very far in the playoffs this year. I do think they have a shot to win their first playoff game against Houston. But after that, I just don't give this team a shot. I just think that, I just think this team looked lost without Derek Carr, and it really showed. But the Broncos, they missed the playoffs. They finished the season at 9-7 after starting 7-3 before their bye week, and then they just happened to slip off. I do think if the Broncos, they do improve in their ground game, I think this team will be fine. Remember, Gary Kubiak resigned after this game as the head coach. He's not coming back due to his health. But I think whoever takes over that role will be a really good spot there. So much talent on this team. And the Kansas City Chiefs clinched a first-round bye with a 37-27 victory over the San Diego Chargers, which is I think it's going to be the last game in San Diego. Phillip Rivers finishes the year with a 269-yard and 2-touchdown performance. Andre Williams, who started at running back due to the injury of Melvin Gordon, finished with 87 yards and 18 carries. And Tyrell Williams finished the game with 70 yards and 6 receptions. As for the Kansas City Chiefs, Alex Smith had an efficient day, going 21 for 28, 264 yards and 2 touchdowns. Did throw a pick. Sarkandrick West was the leading rusher with 58 yards and 16 carries, and he was also the leading receiver with 58 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. So the Chiefs move into the number 2 spot in the AFC West playoff picture. And I do think they're one of 2 teams that can really compete with New England and Foxborough. And I do think they are a legit Super Bowl contender heading into the playoffs. And as for the final afternoon game, the Seattle Seahawks squeaked by the San Francisco 49ers 25-23. This was Chip Kelly's final game because he did get fired after the game as head coach of the 49ers. Russell Wilson finishes the day with 258 yards and 1 touchdown. Alex Collins led the way for the Seahawks with 55 yards and 7 carries. And Sean Jerome actually had a really good game for the Niners yesterday, 68 yards receiving, and I believe he had just under 30 yards rushing. But this was a game where the Niners were absolutely playing for nothing. Seahawks were still playing for playoff positioning. Seahawks finished with a record of 10-5-1. Niners finished with one of their worst seasons in franchise history at 2-14. And of course, like I said, this was Chip Kelly's final game as head coach, as he was fired within an hour after the game. And Colin Kaepernick finishes his year with a 215-yard passing, 16-yard rushing, and 1 touchdown. And, this is a team that has several question marks and how they're going to move forward. Because, they did fire GM Trent Baalke, fired Chip Kelly, and it remains to be seen how this team, what moves they make moving forward, because there's a lot of holes, roster holes, that this team needs to address in the offseason. And moving on to the Sunday night game, With the Redskins losing to the New York Giants, the Detroit Lions clinched a playoff berth. But so the Packers and Lions were playing for the NFC North title on Sunday nights, and the Packers were victorious with a winning 31-24 at Ford Field. Matthew Stafford had a pretty good game, 347 yards and 2 touchdowns. Zach Zinner was efficient again, 69 yards and a touchdown. But Geronimo Allison of the Green Bay Packers helped out Aaron Rodgers there with the 91 touchdown performance. And Aaron Rodgers finishes a very good day with the 4 touchdown, 300-yard performance. He's up to 40. No, not 40. Yeah, he's up to 40 touchdowns of the season. That is incredible. Aaron Rodgers is also someone that's an MVP candidate, and I think he has a legit shot to win it. Devontae Adams had a huge day with 2 touchdowns, and I think that moves him up to 12. So the Packers finished the season with 2 receivers with 10 or more touchdowns. Jordy Nelson has 14. That leads all receivers. Devontae Adams finishes the year with 12. And I do think Green Bay is one of those teams that no one wants to play in the playoffs. They will face the New York Giants, which features a matchup of 2 of the hottest teams to end the year, and that's one I'm looking forward to. But yeah, that is your Week 17 recap. And when I come back, I'm going to recap the playoffs in college. We had, let's just say, they were kind of snoozers. That's all I'm going to say. But we'll be right back here at the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. And before I move on to the recap of the College Football Playoff, I just want to lay out the NFL postseason schedule for Wild Card Weekend. On Saturday, Oakland Raiders will head into NRG Stadium to face the Houston Texans. This is our first game of the playoffs. It features a couple of teams that have gone in certain directions. Houston, they have a mess at quarterback, but they do play in probably the weakest division of football. Oakland, they lost their quarterback due to an injury. So, I think this team, for that reason, are evenly matched. And it should be I think, honestly, it should be a really good one. I think it's going to be a really good defensive game. I think it's going to be a lot of running backs being involved in this game. And I do think this should be a fun one. But I think it's great to see the Oakland Raiders back in the playoffs. I just really think it is. And for the night game on Saturday, the Detroit Lions will go to Central League Field to face the Seattle Seahawks. And this is a very tough matchup for Detroit to begin the game, to begin the playoffs, actually. And, Detroit looked like they were going towards the direction of a Super Bowl contender, but, they kind of slipped towards the stretch. So this is a tough game for Detroit to start the playoffs in. And on Sunday, the final 2 wild card matchups, the Miami Dolphins, the 6th seed, will go into Heinz Field to play the 3rd seed Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a very tough game for Miami without the Ryan Tannehill, their quarterback. But Matt Moore has looked very, very effective as the backup there. And but of course, this is a very tough matchup for a Miami Dolphins team, as they're practically playing against one of the best offenses, in my opinion, in the NFL. As for the final wild card matchup, the New York Giants, the 5th seed, I believe, will play against the 4th seed Green Bay Packers, and these are two of the hottest teams in the year. New York, one of two teams to beat the Dallas Cowboys. I do think they are a legit threat because of that. Green Bay is another team that could practically come out of the NFC as the champion. So I do think that whoever wins this game, I think will be in the NFC Championship, and that's saying a lot. These teams are really dangerous. But as far as playoffs in the college football is concerned, before I get to that, I got to talk about one of the best games of the weekend. The Capital One Orange Bowl featured the Michigan Wolverines and the Florida State Seminoles. And this was a very, very entertaining game. Very entertaining game. And Michigan, they were losing this game, actually, by 20-6. And then Michigan came back and got it within 5, 15-20. And then Florida State extended the lead. And then late in the game, Michigan just came back they came back and take the lead 30-27. And then they blocked the field goal at the end to make it 32-33. And, of course, Michigan just couldn't get it done on offense in the final minutes. But this was a very entertaining game. You know, it had a very exciting end to it. Wilton Spates, he struggled throughout the entire game, 163 yards, and 1 touchdown. You know, and they weren't really effective on the ground. Chris Evans only had 49 yards rushing. Devon Smith had 36 yards rushing on 16 carries. And, yeah, you know, the offense practically struggled throughout the whole game, and it really surprised me. I really thought Florida State's offense was going to struggle with a really good defense in Michigan, but it was the other way around. DeAndre Francois, he only completed 9 passes out of 27 attempts, but finished the game with 222 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. And the fact that you allowed 222 yards passing on 9 completions really pretty much sums up the game for the Wolverines defense there. But a great game from Florida State there. And Dalvin Cook, who is now going to the NFL draft, he declared after this game he finished his college career with a 145-yard rushing performance, and he also added a touchdown to that too. And I expect Dalvin Cook to be one of the top running backs taken. I think he's a top 10 pick. This running back class is just stacked heading into the draft. But what a game for Dalvin Cook and the Florida State Seminoles. I said he won 33-32 against Michigan. And as for the first game of the college football playoffs, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl featured the Alabama Crimson Tide, the 1st seed, and the Washington Huskies, the 7th seed. Alabama ended up winning this game 24-7, and I just gotta say, the Alabama defense just looked too fast. They looked really fast. They just were too much to handle for Jake Browning and this Washington offensive line couldn't get it done against this Alabama front 7. This is probably one of the best historic defensives we've seen in college. But you know, I do think Washington is going to get better. I do think they're going to be back next year even better. But yeah, you know, Alabama won this game 24-7. Washington did score first. They did score first. Alabama answered back. This game was pretty much a 10-point game for the majority of the day. But you know, Alabama was just better on defense. Washington, their defense kept them in this game, but the Alabama's team was just a whole lot better. And yeah, they just were too fast for the Washington Huskies here. But I do expect the Huskies to be back next year. But player of the game, player of the game has to be Bo Scarborough, the running back out of Alabama. Finishes the day with 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. Man, he was running like a man possessed out there, and he was just amazing in this game. He had to have a huge game because Jalen Hurts, the freshman quarterback, I think he had his worst game ever in his college career. You know, he finished 7 out of 14 57 yards. But when you got a running back like Bo Scarborough running the rock like he did, I don't think you need to do a whole lot passing. But Alabama will go into the national championship, and the team that they will face is the Clemson Tigers. The Clemson Tigers defeated the Ohio State Buckeyes 31-0. Ohio State couldn't muster up a point. They couldn't do anything against this Clemson defense, this Clemson team. Deshaun Watson, he did look very effective. He did have 259 yards passing, a touchdown. He did throw 2 picks, but he was effective on the ground as well. He did have 2 touchdowns on the ground with 57 yards rushing. So looked at as one of the top quarterbacks in the draft. He's making his case why he should be one of the top quarterbacks in the draft. He could be going to one of the top 4 teams in the draft, in my opinion. That is the Cleveland Browns, San Francisco 49ers, the Chicago Bears, and maybe the Jacksonville Jaguars. But this Clemson offense really looked like they were too much to handle for the Ohio State defense. And that really surprised me, actually. I didn't think Clemson was going to come out on top like this. But I think, these matchups really show you how, the playoffs, I think in the playoffs, or before heading to the playoffs, there was some talk maybe Penn State should be in there. And maybe this is one of the games maybe this is the game that would justify of having a conference champion in the playoffs. If it was Penn State, I don't know if they would have been. I don't know if the score would have been the same. But this game will be talked about as a reason why Penn State should have been in the playoffs. I really do think so. But Clemson, they just absolutely tore up the Ohio State Buckeyes. But we're gonna take our second break here at the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, and I'm gonna get into a little bit of some coaching news in the NFL. We have some coaches that were fired. Literally yesterday, we have coaches that are resigning, and we got some coaching rumors going on. But I will have all that for you when we come back to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. And to end the show, I'm going to discuss some coaching news that occurred over the past 24 hours. We have multiple coaches that have been fired, and we have one coach actually that is resigning. And as far as the coach resigning, Gary Kubiak, the former coach of the Denver Broncos, announced that he is stepping down on the head coaching role due to health concerns. And this is what he had to say. Quote, "As I told our team last night, this is an extremely difficult decision to step down as coach. I love to work and I love football, but ultimate demands of the job are no longer a good fit for me." And that's what Gary Kubiak said in a statement Monday morning. But Kubiak, he did spend he spent the night at a hospital in October. And, I just got to say, I wish Gary Kubiak luck in the future. And whoever decides to step down or step up to the head coaching role in Denver is walking to a good spot. I think the Denver Broncos could potentially, I think they're a really good fit for Tony Romo. And whoever is the coach for this team, I do think they are going to a really good situation. And there's some really solid coaching candidates out there. I think that would be really good a fit as well. It's hard for me to say Josh McDaniels will be back there. I do think he is actually one of the top coaching candidates this year. But it's tough for me to see him back there after what he went through in his first tenure as the head coach. Kyle Shanahan, I think, could be there. I remember his dad did coach the Broncos there to his multiple Super Bowls with John Elway, so that I can see as a possible candidate, and I do think he is probably the best suitable candidate there. It makes too much sense to not happen, but yeah, that is one head coaching position vacancy that needs to be filled. And I already discussed this earlier in the show, but the San Francisco 49ers officially fired Chip Kelly along with general manager Trent Baalke. I'm actually surprised that Chip Kelly was actually let go. I'm not surprised by Trent Baalke. I kind of feel like he should have been fired 2 years ago. But Chip Kelly was only given 1 year with practically the worst roster in the league. I don't expect how they expect him to turn around within 1 year. But I do think Chip Kelly's coach in the NFL, I do think it's finally over. I don't see a team hiring him as a head coach. I do think Chip Kelly is going to go back to college, even though there's not really a lot of good fits out there. I kind of think he kind of missed out on some of the best fits there. But I do expect Chip Kelly to be back in college, and he unfortunately falls in those coaches that never lived up into the NFL. Nick Saban, Steve Spurrier, really great college coaches that never really quite made a splash in the NFL. But Chip Kelly is no longer with the 49ers, and 49ers have a whole nother disaster or dumpster fire, if you will, to deal with. They got to start with a GM search, head coaching search. They even have questions at quarterback. So they're probably going to have one of the pretty much interesting off seasons heading to the spring here. And I think the coach that I like for the 49ers, I actually like Josh McDaniels to go there. For GM, it's tough to say right now, but I do think Josh McDaniels is actually a really good coach to have on this team. If they happen to go defensive route, I wouldn't be surprised, because this was one of the worst defensive teams historically in the league. And sticking to the West Coast here, the San Diego Chargers fired Mike McCoy following Sunday's loss to the Chiefs. McCoy finished it was his fourth season. He finished his tenure with a 28-38 overall record. He did go 1-1 in his team's only postseason trip, which was in 2013. But the Chargers were one of those dysfunctional teams this year. They had a lot of injuries, but he was there for 4 years, so I'm not really surprised by that. And the Chargers are about to make a move to LA. So it looks like that they have to make a splash right now. If they're going to go to L.A., they have to make a splash right now. And then I'm not surprised by Mike McCoy, getting fired. He really struggled there practically the last 2 years. And as far as the team in L.A. now, the Rams, it looks like they can be getting their next head coach, but he's still employed with the actual team. And, after the Rams fired Jeff Fisher, there was some talk that maybe Sean Payton can be a really good fit for the Rams here. Sean Payton is currently discussing his future with the Saints. And, I do think Sean Payton is a really good fit for the Rams. NOLA.com reported that the Rams are expected to ask permission to speak with Payton this week, and that Loomis, the general manager, Mickey Loomis, would be open to a possible deal. They will have to acquire Sean Payton in a trade, but I do think I wouldn't be surprised if Sean Payton decides to go to LA. There's been some talk that he wants to go there because his daughter is actually in college in Los Angeles. And then he is going to LA. He's going to he's going to a city that's full of stars, and I do think Sean Payton is someone that can bring some star power to this team that absolutely needs it. This is one of the worst offensive teams I've seen this year, and I do think Sean Payton can really coach this team up to potentially be a really good offensive team. And maybe it's possible that he could bring Drew Brees with him, and I think that can be a really benefit to Jared Goff in this Rams franchise. So yeah, it remains to be seen, and and it's very interesting to see it in these coaching vacancies. It's going to be interesting to see who get these. I think Kyle Shanahan makes too much sense for Denver. I like Josh McDaniels with San Francisco. As far as San Diego, I don't know who is the favorite in that right now. And Sean Payton, I think he makes too much sense for the Rams. But who knows? None of this might not even happen. But yeah, but that concludes the show of the today, and I just want to thank you guys for tuning in. And you guys should come back tomorrow, because tomorrow I'm gonna recap some of today's college football action. We got Florida and Iowa in the Outback Bowl. We got Western Michigan and Wisconsin in the Cotton Bowl. We got USC and Penn State in the Rose Bowl, and we got Auburn and Oklahoma in the All-State Sugar Bowl. So we got some really, really fun college football action. This is the final. I think these are final bowl games before the national championship next Monday. But yeah, this is where I think we're in some good action here in college football. But guys, come back tomorrow. I will recap those games and other news that have occurred over the past 24 hours. But I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in to the Going to Media Concepts Football Podcast. As always, I'm Jeremiah, and hopefully to see you guys back tomorrow.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.